Hi, I'm Jacob Floyd, and my dad is running for chief. One of the main things that's impressed me the most from seeing my dad work over the years has been how much he legitimately cares about everybody around him. When I'd go to visit him at work, he seemed to know everyone at his hospitals. Not just the doctors, but the custodial staff, his police force, the volunteers. And perhaps most of all, he'd make great efforts to get to know his patients. Not just their names, but their life stories, their concerns, and their ideas about how to make the hospital better. His office door was always open to them. This means that now, no matter where we travel, whatever random place we go to, it seems like he runs into somebody he knows. But it also means that he's formed lifelong friendships with his employees and patients. With people like Mo, a veteran who had become one of my dad's best friends, and would help me and my dad rebuild my first car from parts from my neighbor's garage. Another important person was John Hartung, a Creek citizen and World War II veteran he met as VA Medical Center director in Salt Lake City. Here my father tells about their friendship, a friendship that illustrates the important life-changing benefits of his management style, one that is centered in serving and caring for people.
When I was the director of the VA Salt Lake City healthcare system, I was in my office one day and heard this loud voice outside my office, and so the doors opened and I could hear this guy saying that he wanted to see the director, and he'd heard that he was a Creek Indian and he wanted to see for himself. So I got up and met him at the door, had him come in and invited him to sit down, but he wouldn't sit down. Very imposing guy, big broad shoulders and long hair, and very skeptical of me, even though I told him I was Creek. He said, "Well, I'm Creek Indian and I can prove it." He said, "I've got a book that shows all my family." So I said, "Okay, I'd like to see it. Next time you're in, come in and let's take a look at it." So about a week later he came back. He had the book and he opened it up to his page he'd already had earmarked, and said, "Here's who I am." And he said, "Here's my mom, here's my grandmother, my great-grandmother." And he said, "This proves I'm Creek Indian." And so I said, "Well, that book looks familiar." I said, "Can I see it?" And so I turned a couple pages and I said, "Okay, here's my family." I said, "Here's my mom, here's my grandmother, my great-grandmother." And I said, "We're both in the same book." And I said, "We're both of the same family." And so immediately he just had a whole change in his demeanor. And he says, "Then we're cousins." And I said, "Right, we're cousins." And then he seemed to just, I don't know, the whole demeanor changed. He just seemed to be a different person entirely. As a veteran, he was getting care at the hospital, and so we sat down and visited for a little while, and so immediately he wanted to make plans. So let's get together for lunch, let's talk, get to know each other more. And so we did. We started to meet, and I found out that he was born in Oklahoma, and he grew up in Oklahoma, but at about age 7, he was adopted out of this Indian family and raised by non-Indians, and so he had lost contact with a lot of our family members. At the age of 18, he left Oklahoma and was going to, and he did, hitchhike to California with another friend. They were going to get into the movie business. That was 1941, and that didn't pan out. So at the age of 18, he joined the Marines in California. He trained in California, then was transferred to the Pacific. And the first assignment that he had was at Pearl Harbor. He was there for a few months, and then they assigned him to Wake Island. In December of 1941, as we know, Pearl Harbor was bombed. The second place that the Japanese took the war to was Wake Island, and that's where he was. And so that's one of the toughest battles they had early in the war. With only about 300 soldiers there, they held the island for about 14 days. And on December 21st, 1941, they were captured. Prior to being captured, John was smart enough to, and the other soldiers, that they buried food out on the island. And so even though they were captured and held by guards and under armed guards, John was able to time when these guards would come around, and so at nighttime he'd sneak out and dig up some of the food they had and take it back to his fellow soldiers. And one night he got caught by a Japanese soldier who pointed a gun at him, was getting ready to kill him, and he had 2 cans of food under his arm. And so he gave one to the Japanese soldier, and somehow they, without speaking the same language, came to an agreement that one person took 1 can, John took the other can, and went back to the camp. Shortly afterwards, he went by ship, the hull of the ship, to Japan, where he served as a prisoner of war in Japan and China. He remained a prisoner of war throughout from 1941 till September 1945, when he was liberated and brought back to the United States. After that, he stayed around the West Coast and the state of Utah. He was fairly successful in starting radio stations, doing broadcasting, teaching at universities, and then had retired to Salt Lake City, and that's where I had met him. But he had never really opened up about all the things that he had gone through during being a prisoner of war, because he was a big person. He got beat quite a bit. And that all those memories stayed with him. He'd tell me about that, and he would tell me about, because he was the biggest guy there, that they would beat on him more than anybody else. And so he carried all of these stories with him, and this hatred and everything about his captors, and till we started talking, and I invited him up to our house on holidays, and would get together, and little by little these things would start going away. The hatred soon went away, until one day he said that he didn't have any bad feelings toward them anymore, that that's all gone, and he'd had this dream, and now he's at peace. Shortly thereafter, though, he was diagnosed with cancer, and we cared for him as long as we could. He wanted to go visit and stay with his daughter, who lived in Oregon, and so he moved to Oregon, and that's where he passed, and was buried with honors in the National Cemetery in Oregon. Several years later, as I became director of the Muscogee VA, I worked with the different tribes, and when I worked with the Creek Nation, I met Ken Davis. Ken was in the process of organizing an event and recognition of soldiers who were either killed or captured and held as prisoners during World War II and other wars, and was building a memorial outside the Veterans Office in Muscogee. So he was reading through the names of all the people, and I said, well, you don't have John Hartung. And he'd never heard of him. And I said, well, he's Creek Indian. And I said, you need to get John Hartung on the wall, because he was a Marine. He served in World War II. So we found through the VA's Office of Benefits his original file where he had applied for benefits after coming out of World War II. And so we had it shipped to Muscogee. And so one day I met Ken Davis there, and we opened up his claim file, and there was documentation of everything that he had gone through during World War II. And it was very impressive. And so from that, Ken was able to document that he was a prisoner of war, where he served, and for the ceremony that the Creek Nation put together for ex-prisoners of war and those who had been killed in action, I was able to attend on behalf of John's family, none of which could make the ceremony, to stand up and be recognized for John on his behalf, as they put a plaque on the wall in the Veterans Office in Okmulgee, recognizing him as a prisoner of war during World War II. And, to me, that's, as I still go over there from time to time, doing business with Ken and veterans. It just always feels good to walk by the monument outside there, because it just feels like I can feel John's soul, and I can feel that he's at peace. And then I can go inside and see his name, his plaque on the wall, and that means a lot to me, knowing that I had come across John in my life and we'd become friends, found out we were related, and then helping Ken document his service so that he could be formally recognized by the tribe.